Hello, this is Rick Matthew, Dean of the McCall School of Business, and welcome to Food for Thought in the McCall School of Business at Queen's University, Happy Hour edition. So here we are at 4 o'clock in the afternoon on a Monday, and we welcome each of you to our speaker series here today. And we're excited to be talking about cybersecurity. And in particular, are you immune from the nation state cyber attack? And I can't think of any better way to do that than to bring in a panel of experts on cybersecurity. And today we're lucky to be joined by one of our professors in the McCall School, Dr. Alan Tervelin, who will be our moderator today. And Dr. Tervelin, he teaches management information systems for us, but he comes to Queens with over 35 years of experience, including work at the C-level, including some time as a chief information officer. So we're lucky to have him be on our faculty. And Alan, I'm going to turn it over to you to let you introduce our great panelists that we have here today. So thank you, Alan, for moderating today's session. And again, hello, everybody. Have a great session today.
Thanks, Rick. I appreciate the opportunity and honor to moderate this session. So let me have the panelists introduce themselves. I'll start with Sharon Lewis, and then we'll go to Sean. Sharon, you want to tell everybody a little bit about your background?
Sure. Excuse me while my video up here. All right, there we go. Good afternoon. My name is Sharon Lewis. I am a 20-year IT information systems manager. I currently work for Booz Allen Hamilton. However, my career spans back to General Dynamics as well as Sprint Telecom, where I've managed programs for secure voice data to include cybersecurity. I am pleased to be here today and part of the panel and look forward to our discussion. That's the brief introduction on myself. So over to you, Al. Thanks.
Sean, do you want to tell everybody a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, hey, thanks, Alan. My name is Sean Robinson. I'm currently the principal at Cloud Eye Consulting, which is a cybersecurity consulting firm. We service mostly small and medium-sized businesses. I have 28 years of IT and security experiences in various verticals to include financial services and telecom, as well as the military. So that's the quick and dirty version.
Okay. I'm looking for Neil. I don't. So we have Neil Campbell joining us. I think he's having a little communications issues logging in. So Neil is the Director of Security Operations at Fiserv, and he's leading the online and mobile banking cybersecurity team. And I think I see him joining right now. So I'll wait just a second, and Neil, if you can take yourself off mute and video and introduce yourselves, because you're probably going to do a much better job than I will.
Thanks. Are you able to hear me?
Able to hear you, not able to see you yet.
Okay, let's see. And
Yeah, there we go.
There we go. Some people would call that a feature, right? Unable to see me, able to hear me. But yeah, my name is Neil Campbell. I work in cybersecurity and have done so for a number of years now, with a focus on online and mobile banking currently. So, and a McCall alum, along with many of my colleagues. So glad to be here today.
Okay, great. So what we'll do is we'll start off I'll start off with the first question, and I think I'll ask Sean for the so that we don't have everybody jumping in at once. And then maybe we can go to Neil and then Sharon to talk about what they think. So we read about the attacks on SolarWinds and FireEyes. It was all over the newspapers. Sean, do you think these attacks are more of the same, or are they? Do you think we'll see more of them? What do you think?
Yeah, so Alan, attacks from nation states, they're not new, right? That's been going on for quite some time in cyberspace. I think what's different with the SolarWinds attack is the depth and breadth of the attack that we've seen, how many large businesses as well as federal government agencies that were compromised in relations to this breach, the fact that it went undetected for so long, right? And you think about the federal government, they've put a lot of money into a platform that they were calling Einstein, right? Which is built specifically to detect these types of attacks, which looks like it was a large-scale failure on so many different levels, right? And then now we're looking, as we continue to get more information about the SolarWinds incident. Now it looks like it was not only Russia, but they're also saying that the Chinese was involved in the SolarWinds incidents, as well as the most recent event with the Microsoft Exchange servers, right? That is another large-scale breach that just happened recently here. So those types of attacks, I think, are going to continue to proliferate as we go forward. We're in, from a geopolitical standpoint, we're in what they call a great power competition between the United States and Russia and China, right? So cyberspace is going to play a huge role in this geopolitical contention that's going on between these nations. So I expect this landscape to continue to be exploited going forward.
Okay, thanks. Neil, what do you think?
Yeah, it's definitely, I agree. It's going to continue. I think that when we think of nation state attacks, we think about an attack against another nation, and that certainly does happen. But what I would, in the idea of, do I need to worry about this with my organization? I'd say that there's a close-knit tie between nation state attack development and bad actors, right? So it's often not the nation state themselves that are doing the development work, but it is external to government agency. And these things do not stay secret, and they do not stay within the nation that it's being developed for and against the nation that's being attacked. So many of the best attacks that we've seen have been developed in the WannaCry instance by the NSA itself, turned into ransomware and then used to extract money from organizations. So yes, it'll continue nation against nation attacks, nation against companies, and it's also going to be appropriated by bad actors to profit. So that's pretty much it on that one.
So Sharon, you want to weigh in and what you've seen?
Yeah, I would agree with both Neil as well as Sean. I think spot on. In addition to that, I think we should get what was unique about attack specifically, and how does it change how we look at the nation state attacks from the nation. What's unique about this one is the overall impact that it had. It occurred. There's, I think as we're discovering more and learning more about what occurred over a period of the past year, it really started back in 2018, and we really didn't discover it until December of this past year. And I think the estimate and Sean can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think what unique about this is that it didn't target personal identification. It targeted specific tools and applications that are being used by a myriad of different industry level company corporations as well as the government. So it's a unique attack in that it actually targets specific companies, and so we're still learning what they were able to exploit and obtain from that. Currently, I think SolarWinds is estimating about 18,000 of their customers have been impacted. And Microsoft alone has said that they've had anywhere from over 1,000 of their engineers continuing to discover on a day-to-day basis the overall impact that this is to their organization and their client base, which is probably one of the largest customer bases across the globe. So I think that is unique in that it's different from what we've seen in the past. You could say it involves the Sony hack several years ago, but it's different in that it actually did target the government as well. So more to follow on that as things come to light.
So Sharon, I got to ask this question because I'm sitting here in my, we'll call it my home office, as it looks like everybody else is. So do you think if we were back in our prior lives before COVID, if, and we were not locked down, do you think we would have found the attack faster? Do you think we would have been able to uncover that we were getting attacked?
Yeah, great question, Al. I think, hindsight's 2020 to give you a politically correct answer there, but all things considered, it's difficult to say whether or not we would or would not have actually identified this hack. I think we are fortunate in that FireEye identified it and immediately publicized what they were able to find. There is no requirement right now. The government is certainly putting parameters in place and regulations in place that will require companies to publicize whenever they do find a hack. But fortunately, FireEye, and this is the industry that they're in, obviously, they were able to provide that. As far as the pandemic, I think it has certainly changed things, to say the least. Very possibly would we have identified it if we had folks working from an office? It just depends. I've used SolarWinds over the process of my 20-something years. I'm sure Neil and Sean are quite familiar with it as well. I come from a bit of a networking background, so it's a strong networking tool that many networkers use, as well as SOCs and NOCs across the U.S. So I think that had people been actually reporting in as they did prior to 2020, we probably would have possibly identified it, but there's just no telling at this point. So I will defer to my colleagues to see what they have to say, because I'd be interested to hear their perspectives as well.
All right, Neil, I'm going to put you back on the spot.
That's a really good question. It boils down to, are we as effective in cybersecurity remote as we are together organizationally? And I'm going to say that I believe we are as effective in our current state at finding exploits and fighting them. I think that so many effective organizations are highly dispersed anyway, that this really shows a weakness in our overall defense capability rather than our geolocation.
Sean, what do you think?
Yeah, I think I would agree with both Sharon and Neil. I'm not necessarily under the impression that if we were in the office, right, we would have found this sooner, because a lot of organizations, they're not actively threat hunting, right? Going out and looking for these types of activities, right? And the fact that it took one of our nation's most advanced organizations that does threat hunting, right? As long as it took for them to find it, right? And they are actively day in and day out looking for these types of activities, and it took them that long, right? So I'm not sure if we would have found it if we were all in the office, right? Because at the end of the day, there are competing priorities within every organization when it comes to security. So I'm not sure if we would have found it any quicker versus remote or at in the office.
Okay, so following on that thought, do you think working from home creates more opportunities for more attacks or more nation states? What do you think, Sean?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely, it has created opportunity because your attack surface has gotten huge, right? Where you only had to basically defend your organization, meaning your corporate offices and your known remote offices, right? So if you had a company that has 20,000 employees, but you had 15 offices supporting those organizations, right? You only had to defend those 15 locations, basically. Now you've got to defend 20,000 new offices, right? Because everybody's home is now one of your branch or remote offices. And depending on how you've had your employees access in your environment, we've seen stories where people are using their personal computers to do their work, right? And a lot of people's personal computers are not as secure as ones that are typically provided by your organization. So that allows criminals to exploit other vulnerabilities in your from your PC or your home network. And sometimes employees are not as vigilant as they would normally be in the office. When they're at home, you're a lot more comfortable in your environment, and sometimes your guard can be let down, and the level of sophistication with phishing attacks around like COVID-19 or a stimulus check, people are clicking on things that they would not normally click on, I think at accelerated rates, and allowing criminal actors to take advantage of that.
You mean like the kids are using your PC or your Mac and they're clicking on things that pop up, that type of stuff? Yeah. So Neil, what do you think about working from home? Does that create more opportunities or less?
Yeah, it does. It definitely creates an opportunity from a system perspective. I think it's been covered pretty well, right? The surface area of how can your system be accessed, right? One of the things that nation states do really well, and it's a really effective exploit, is your basic escalation of privileges and getting into a PC or a device that's sitting at someone's house. I don't think it's physical access, right? But remote access is certainly a possibility. And we're using a lot of networks that aren't necessarily the most secure. Right, even if you're using a VPN, you may at times have your system logged on that it's not VPN connected. So I think it's an opportunity, and there's a lot of it that's, of course, right. The most effective or most common attacks that we see are simple phishing and vishing attacks. And I think, when I went to my office and I went to the lunchroom, there was a big thing up there, kind of like the no injuries in so many days, right? It's use a strong password, and strong is written out in alphanumeric. And reminders not to let people access or don't respond to unsolicited emails, all those things. As we do job switching between our day job and our jobs as parents or teachers or whatever else we have going on in this highly integrated life, I think it's a lot easier to just kind of forego the good work security hygiene. So I think there's a lot of points of potential access for bad actors.
And it's easy to click on those phishing emails that somebody's taking a survey to see how you're doing in this time of COVID. So Sharon, what do you think?
Yeah, I think Neil and Sean did a great job of really answering that question. I don't know if I can provide much more, but I'll attempt to just provide kind of a overarching perspective. I think that yes, obviously, I think anytime you have people working remotely, it provides an opportunity. But I think what's even more important is how many times have you walked away from your computer and actually, oops, sorry, I'm having a technical malfunction. Hang on a second. Okay, I don't know what happened. I think they're pushing an update to my system. Go figure. What perfect timing. I'm on a call about cybersecurity. So what I would say is, how many times have you walked away from your computer, actually left your, your token or your CAT card or your whatever you're using to actually authenticate and forgotten to pull that out and take it with you? I think that we have to be vigilant in the parameters that have been given to us when we are working remote. That way we do limit the exposure and opportunity for nation states to attack our systems. So we have to be smart and logical in our approach. But I think Sean and Neil did a great job in kind of answering those questions. So thanks.
So Sharon, what do you think in terms of a normal business? What could we do? I mean, you run a highly secure major government program for DoD, right? If I remember correctly. But what can we? I'm certainly not running a major DoD program. What can we do to make sure that we're protecting ourselves?
Sure. Great question. So obviously I can't give away any secrets here, but what I would say is that I think that, there's a lot of things that can be done to ensure you're protecting your systems, whether you're DoD or a company or even a small business, a mom and pop shop, or maybe you're just running online sales. What I would say is that the thing that folks should actually be conscientious about is actually ensuring that you're updating your systems. Whenever you note that there's a patch, make sure you're updating those systems. I think one of the things that I found over my career is so many people also, in whether they're a business or a large organization, they don't do a good job of actually using a non-production network. Try to use I think you need to use a non-production network. What that means is use some kind of a test environment, a lab environment where you can actually test. I don't know in this predicament with the SolarWinds hack whether or not that would have identified anything, but I do think that it gives you the opportunity, if there is something that's going to pop up on, in your system, you'll see it hopefully. In addition to that, some of the things that I would probably advise is, again, put in those encryption devices, ensure that you're connecting your VPNs, ensure that you're authenticating. If it says that you can't, if the certificate is bad for this website, don't go to that website. I don't know how many people continue to press on like it's no big deal. And next thing you know, they're calling up about some kind of issue that they're experiencing. So I think that those parameters are out there. It's just a matter of not looking at things as just a hindrance and rather looking at it as a protection. working in a network shop or in an ops center, I've seen where people just think of it as an inconvenience to do these things, but that's really, it's a more of an inconvenience when your whole network goes down because you've been hacked. So we have to look at the risks, and we need to understand how we're addressing those as well. So that's probably a good perspective from a very high level.
Thanks. So Neil, you're in fintech, you're in financial services, another industry that is known for strong security control. But what would you tell us as normal business operators? What can we do?
Yeah, absolutely. So the first, it's really down to the basics, and even the bad actors exploit the basics. So use different usernames and passwords across different systems. Store a secure passcode keeper on your non-jailbroken device, right? Your secure device. They're easy to use. It doesn't have to be, you don't need a 24-character username and password to be secure, but you want to use different username and passwords on different systems. If you use for your target account the same username and password that you use for your business account that you use for your financial institution login, it's not going to, you don't lose the security where the primary target is, you lose it at the secondary target. So I guess that's too many targets in that sentence. But, you go shopping and put in a username and password for a Harris Teeter checkout. Next thing you know, you'll find out that Harris Teeter had a breach, and you don't really think two things of it. And next thing you know, you've got a new mortgage with Citibank, or you've got a HELOC with Citibank, and that's really pretty basic stuff. Shredding paper documents, right? When you file your taxes, if you do anything in paper, make sure that you shred it, take stuff to the post office. It's basic stuff everybody knows. It can feel like an inconvenience, but nothing close to the inconvenience of losing control of your credentials.
I have seen passwords that I used 10, 15 years ago show up in my spam email. That's pretty scary, right? Because it only could have been through a hack.
That's right.
So,
years on from a system that's no longer in use, no longer being patched, right? But at one time it was a current system, and later became vulnerable, and now your credentials are for sale on the dark web for a fraction of a penny.
So Sean, you're setting up a new chapter of the ISC Squared in Charlotte, which is the professional group for cybersecurity. So what would you tell us normal folks about what we could do?
Well, I think Neil and Sharon both said it best, right? It comes down to there's basic cybersecurity hygiene that we all can make use of, like as Neil mentioned, using a password manager, so you're not using the same password and username and password on multiple accounts. As Sharon stated, making sure you're patching your systems, right? When there's an update that comes out, if you have the ability to test those patches in a test environment, do so. But if not, for a small home user, make sure you're patching your environment, and be mindful of the sites that you are going to. If you're receiving email links that say click here, if they look a little bit squirrely, exercise common sense. Your gut is a useful tool to a degree, right? From a business standpoint, I'm seeing more people actually start to utilize what they call zero trust networks, right? So that is now going from just being a buzzword to people actually starting to flesh it out and see like actually what creating a zero trust network, what that would actually look like for an organization of any size, right? Whether it be a medium size or a large organization. And since we're all in the cloud, um, there's another technology that I'm seeing a lot now. It's called SASE. It's all about basically being able to provide secure access to any type of device, whether it's IoT. It's mostly going to be like having strict policies around different applications. So utilizing the technology that is out there and available, starting to utilize that, I think is going to help us as we move forward, because I think the remote environment for our employees is here to stay. It's not going anywhere as we move into the future. So we've got to set up environments that are going to be as secure as reasonably possible, because at the end of the day, if a nation state wants to get you, they've got enough time and money to get you.
So
Yeah, if
Sharon,
I
I
can-
think you were,
yeah.
you were going to mention some.
I was just going to say some other just quick tips that I was thinking of as Sean and Neil were just talking, is just to ensure that you have separation of duties. Again, managing a major enterprise, a global enterprise, I can't tell you how many times engineers have come and complained to me because they can't do everything. And there's a reason for that. We want to make sure that we have separation of duties. We want to make sure that there are permissions levels, ensured within an organization. If you give permissions to one person across the board, if they do get hacked, you've now given permissions across the board to whoever the hacker is. And you want to try to avoid that. I think that that's a good, strong, level that you can put in place to actually avoid a major hack. The other thing I would say is that whether you're a small company, organization, or a large company or organization, I think that it's important to really have communications with your senior leadership up to the CEO level to ensure that you understand what the risks, what their perspective is of the risks, and that they understand from you as the expert what are the things that we need to be focusing on and investing in. Because I think if you don't understand from the executive leadership perspective what potential gaps you may have or vulnerabilities, it's hard to actually go in after you've been hacked and try to prevent that in the future. You want to try to get in it ahead of it, and having those discussions, again, from the engineer level all the way up to the CEO level or C level is important, so that they understand what could potentially happen if this happened to us. What do we need to make sure that we have partitioned off, and how can we avoid compromising any data or any other areas within that organization? Those are just two additional things I thought of that might be helpful.
So here's what I'm hearing. I'm hearing use good password security, right? Sounds like basics, but I guess I can't use my welcome one password anymore. I need something a little more complicated. I'm hearing, I think, Neil, you mentioned patching, keeping everything up to date. I heard separation of duties. I heard communication. Wow, these sound like things that I should be practicing. Would you think we practice them enough? That's kind of an open question to the three of you. Is it something we're good at, or something,
It probably depends on organization to organization. I mean, again, I think every organization probably feels they're doing a good job, but overall, when you dig into it, you'll probably find that there are some improvement areas. I'm not going to say whether or not one organization is doing worse at it than another. frankly, because I think there's always room for improvement no matter where you sit and from what perspective you come from, whether it's a company or a government agency. But, again, it's about constant monitoring and assessing the overall impact. I think you can never do enough of that. And I think the more that you do that, the better off you're going to be in the long run.
Sounds good. So let me ask my last question. And this is in context of the recent nation state hack that we all read about. And I'll start with Neil. So do you think this has changed the opportunities in cybersecurity, career opportunities for people? Is it different? What do you think? What's going on?
So what I would say, and hopefully this is music to your ears, is cybersecurity is going to go the way of any field, in that a large portion of it is going to become automated and highly repeatable. But that means that there's an ever increasing sophistication of what's going to be used. And I think it will continue. I don't think anything changes other than the demand is going to be higher. And as that happens, companies will seek automation to press down the low-hanging fruit, more effective blockers on emails to keep team members from clicking through phishing URLs, right? And it also means that it's going to take continuing education and personal development and knowledge acquisition to fight the emerging and zero-day threats. So, and I think that we have seen, right? This is just any industry that matures. You see a productization and really a lowering of cost basis to cover your bases. But you're going to see a continued need for highly skilled, educated, critical thinkers.
So Sharon, what do you think the career opportunities look like for cybersecurity? Changing, getting better?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I can take this from kind of two perspectives. One would be just, someone who's thinking about going into that field. But I think there's a broader scope that Neil alluded to, which is your machine learning, artificial intelligence, automation, as well as looking at self-healing networks and different types of capabilities that are still very, very new. And even when we start moving into more quantum compute and some of these other areas, I think there's a tremendous value to companies. And overall, there's not enough cybersecurity professionals already out there. So we want to certainly encourage folks, if this is something that they're looking at moving into. I think that, you move into a very niche area with a broad ability to move across the enterprise, whether it be directly supporting cybersecurity or looking at automation, as Neil mentioned, artificial intelligence, et cetera. I think the other thing is, overall, I think studies have shown that, cybersecurity is about 15% above the average salary for the most part. And I think that comes from whether you're looking at the Bureau of Labor and Statistics or you're looking at some of the other studies that are out in the marketplace. And of course, it has to do with the economic area that you're looking at. But overall, I live in a very, I guess you could say, kind of not rural, but we have a military base here. But I know that the government's always looking for qualified, skilled cybersecurity experts. But in addition to that, they're looking at advancing their networks, advancing their systems, and ensuring that they're staying 2 to 3 steps, if not more, ahead of those that are looking to exploit and get into our network. So I think there's a tremendous value. I think that there's additional opportunities. And I think that anyone who's interested in going into the IT field certainly has, I think every position, no matter how you're looking at it, to include to include actually being the user, everybody has a responsibility in some role that they play in cybersecurity. So that would be my 2 cents on that.
Good. So Sean, you've certainly got your pulse on what's going on in Charlotte through the ISC squared committee or chapter. What do you think is happening with careers in cybersecurity?
Yeah, I mean, I think Sharon and Neil did a great job. So the opportunities in cybersecurity, I think they're just going to continue to grow and expand, right, as we move into the future. As Neil talked about with the advancement in a lot of the automation, there's going to be a lot of need for like specialized skills around those things, right? Whether you're talking about like pen testing or engineering and designing new security tools, those skills are going to continue to be invaluable as we move forward. I mean, there's a reason that there's like zero unemployment for cyber security, as they say, right? One of the other things I would ask people to focus on outside of the technical aspects of cybersecurity is around like the governance and risk management aspects of cybersecurity, right? Being able to help organizations identify risk and being able to quantify the impacts of those risks to be able to help the folks on the technical side be able to present why we need specific tools or controls to be put in place, and being able to articulate that from a business standpoint here. And that's one of the reasons I think it was such a great privilege, Alan, to connect with you and Rick and Queens, what you guys are building there, and allowing our chapter to be a part of it, to reach back into the community and bring, whether it be high school kids, kids in community college, and kids that are at four-year colleges, right, to give them more exposure to all of the different avenues that are encompassed in cybersecurity. I think one of the things that sometimes scares kids away is like, it's too technical, it's too much tech and math, and it's like, well, there are a lot of opportunities for you to get into the field outside of being able to code and just be a geek like myself, right? So yeah, I mean, I think that the opportunities are vast in relation to cybersecurity as we go forward.
That's a great point, Sean. I'm glad you mentioned that. We don't all have to be techies to participate and add value to this issue. Neil, were you going to say something?
Yeah, I was. I really like that, Alan. Sean, you mentioned people that can look at a framework, and I just wanted to state, right, it's so important. And there is a place for people that are not always hands on keyboard or eyes on glass. When we look to get funding for security efforts, in a large organization, you're competing against features, right? Ultimately, there's a investment decision that needs to be made. Do I invest in a new improved feature that's going to improve user interaction and stickiness of this application or function or service? Or am I going to build out a new server or expand my hosted solution? Or am I going to add another pen tester or team of pen testers to my security? And so having whatever framework you use, right? Every organization should have a risk assessment framework. There's many that are good, but to be able to measure the benefit and the cost, and then ascribe scarce resources to the greatest value of the organization, and balancing out security and feature is just critical.
So I'm going to make one comment, and then I'm going to turn it over to Elizabeth for some Q&A. But Neil, I'm glad you brought that up. Yeah, having grown up in the F&A side of the business, you know, unfortunately, the time everybody talks about security is after you get hacked, which is not a good time. And it's very hard for business leaders to understand, what am I spending the money on? And in a lot of cases, it's, you know, I want to know a firewall from a second generation, from a first generation, and I don't understand. What they do understand is what happens if I don't keep up. And I think, unfortunately, or fortunately, depending which way you look at it, that nation state hack that we were with FireEye and SolarWinds, hopefully got everybody understanding you need to invest. And it's not, you know, it's an important thing. So let me turn it over to Elizabeth for some Q&A. And I'll turn it over.
Great. Thank you, Alan, and thank you, Sean and Neil and Sharon, for sharing your insights with us. This has been so informative. And so I want to invite everyone who is here to go ahead and use the Q&A function and enter in any questions that you have. And we'll go ahead and get started off with this one. What can we do to make our remote workers less vulnerable? And shift that mindset of doing all of these things from a nuisance to a necessity.
Who wants to go first?
I'll take that
Yeah,
first.
go, Sean.
Simple security awareness training, right? Is going to be key to keep your employees engaged and informed, right? But I think you need to craft your security awareness in a way that it makes sense to the folks on your team, to where they can take what you're teaching them and apply it in a more practical level at home, right? Is they can see the value of doing certain things from a security standpoint, like Neil mentioned previously, around like passwords and why it's important. Because if your Harris Teeter password is the same as your bank password, that's a bad idea, right? So implementing security awareness training, I think, is going to be key in this remote environment to give people the kind of awareness that they need from a security standpoint.
Neil, Sharon?
Yeah, I think that's fantastic. Sean, it's engaging security awareness, right? That goes beyond the once yearly required training. And if you can tell a story or engage people in a story, I think that's all the better. You know, there's a lot of services that will try and fish your team members in a way that then you can say, hey, you shouldn't have clicked on that link, and here's why. That can be good. It can also, if it's done right, I think that you can have contests like the fishiest fish email images and things like that to show. And then, of course, anything that you can bulletproof through policy, and I mean a technical policy that gets pushed to systems, not a policy as in it's in the handbook. So, you know, if you can limit so that you can't have a open connection to the internet without a VPN tunnel being opened on your computer, if you can require a soft or hard token, if you can push a policy to devices that ensures the device isn't jailbroken or rooted, if it's going to be used for business, that helps too. It's a lot of overhead, but if you can make enjoyable and entertaining the education portion, and then have policies that are automatically enforced on the technology, that's a big help.
Yeah, I guess from my perspective, I think Sean and Neil did a good job of hitting it. I think cyber and security awareness is extremely important. But I think in addition to that, providing something that they can relate to and helping them to understand what other organizations have seen and understanding how serious this is, give them good examples. I think Neil and Sean both mentioned the same thing. I think when a user understands what could potentially happen and that it has happened to other companies and to somebody just like them, I think that it brings it closer to home and they don't feel so bulletproof necessarily. But I think also having those service organizations do provide emails that may not really be a true phishing attack, but give that impression to see if users are really paying close attention to what they're receiving and then notifying their CERT team or their IT department that they just received a phishing attempt. I know multiple organizations that do that, and I think it keeps people on their toes. And then I know some people who click this button and end up having to go back through security awareness training because they clicked the button that they weren't supposed to click. But I mean, and it's a good reminder, they won't do that again in the future. So I think just being vigilant too, you know, within your organization and monitoring basically what's going in and out of your network is critical too, whether it's a VPN or it's users that are logging into the system, but then going out to the internet too is important. So other than that, I think Sean and Neil did a great job of really covering the different areas and ways to kind of streamline that, make it not as burdensome to users. It's a good question though.
Great. Another one is Neil mentioned, and a couple of y'all did after that as well, using password or using a different password for all of the different sites that you are visiting. So what is your opinion on apps that share your passwords that people use in order to remember all of those passwords that they have?
Neil, why don't you start? I'll pick on
Apps that share or apps that store, right? So
Store.
Sure.
yeah, so I think that like any other application, you can have a well encrypted, maintained, reputable application that I would support using over and above trying to remember a dozen username password combinations and then having to go to forgot password. So I personally don't have a problem with having an application. I did mention that I use a non-jailbroken, non-rooted device. I know I've said that a few times, but it really makes a difference in the overall security. And then it's if the username passwords are encrypted, the data behind the application is encrypted, and you're on a device that's not been jailbroken, I'm all for it.
Sean?
I would concur with Neil. I use a password manager myself. I'll throw a name out, not advertising LastPass, and I also use a YubiKey. So those are the types of things that are simple things that you can use to protect yourself.
Yeah, that's great. I agree with Sean. I think a YubiKey is good to use as well, but I think most average Americans probably don't know what we're talking about, to be honest with you. So, and that's okay. Now you go look and figure out what that is. So good research topic. But you know, there are certain applications I would definitely be cautious about what you're using. Use a trusted application that you're familiar with and that you're not just, you know, downloading from the App Store. Do some research, you know. I think, you know, your local chapter too, as Sean would probably mention, there's good information to be had there. If you're not sure, maybe call them and see if they can give you some good advice too. But it's good.
Yeah, I think Sharon mentioned a really good point about the App Store, right? Download a reputable company from an official App Store, not an app that's linked from anything other than an App Store. That's pretty basic stuff, right? But you could Google and come across something that looks really good. But if it's a direct download, I would stay away from it.
Great. I'm going to let us do one last question in order to wrap this up. And that is, are you concerned about the critical structure and infrastructure in the U.S., our electric grid, our food supply chain, our airports?
I can take that one. I would say I'm not concerned. I would say that we have a good infrastructure. It's solid. I think anybody is potentially vulnerable, but I think that we've got incredibly skilled individuals who are doing their very best to protect. I can't say that I know that for fact, because I do not know that for fact. But after working in this industry for many years now, a couple decades and longer, I won't go into the specifics because I'll tell how old I am. But we have a great infrastructure, and I think that I'm not challenging anybody, by the way, to go prove me wrong. I'm just saying I think that we do have a good infrastructure, but there's always potential for vulnerabilities. There's incredibly smart hackers out there that are looking for those vulnerabilities. Anything can happen. It's really to ensure that we have those defenses in place. To ensure that there's separation again between the different layers of the infrastructure, as well as how we have it dispersed across our networks and our enterprise. So I think that's the critical piece, is understanding that while somebody may hack into one area, we want to make sure that there's a separation between that area and another area within that actual enterprise. But I, again, will defer to Sean and Neil to kind of provide their 2 cents on what they think.
What do you think, Neil?
I think I don't lose sleep overnight on it. I think that Sharon covered it well, that there's really good multi-layers of security, and there's isolation on critical infrastructure like power plants. I think we will continue to see attacks against those, but again, using a good risk framework, an appropriate layered security defense is put in place against the areas of vulnerability, and a lot of money is spent on it. I think we'll see more freshwater plants that have a higher salt content than anticipated, because someone got in it remotely and figures out how to increase the salinity in water, for example, is possible and a lot more likely than someone enabling a nuclear reactor to overheat or anything like that. And I will say that from a safety and security standpoint, this is kind of an aside, I am very much for autonomous vehicles from a safety and security perspective. So let me just forecast, right, that's an area that there's going to be a lot of concern about letting people having access to automobiles that are autonomously driven. And I actually think the opposite is true. That's a real area of security and in a bright spot.
Let me add one point, and then I'll ask Sean to finish. So one thing that I've found in that you don't have to be a big company or a big government agency to get hacked by a nation state. You could be a company of 100 people doing oil drilling, which is, there's lots of companies out there. You're a target. So just, you shouldn't think that just because you're a smaller company that you're immune. So we do have good security, but you got to practice those good processes that the group talked about. Sean, what do you think?
I would agree with Neil and Sharon's assessment around whether it be the power grid, water, airlines. I think that there is an appropriate level of layered security in place. There are some great people that I know personally working in all of those areas, and I think that the likelihood of a large-scale incident involving power or water or nuclear is going to be highly unlikely. That's not to say that there could not be some smaller incidents that take place, but due to the fact that there's appropriate levels of isolation within the environments or segmentation within the environments, I think large scale impacts are highly unlikely.
Great.
Thanks.
Thank you so much. And we are right after 5 o'clock, so we need to wrap this up and let everyone go on with their evenings. But again, thank you, Alan and Sean and Neil and Sharon, for having this panel discussion about such important issues and sharing your insights with us. We are looking forward to having anyone who is here attend our next Food for Thought. We'll have another one that's more focused on the HR space coming up in the next month or two. And we also invite you to learn more about the McCall School of Business. We offer undergraduate majors. We have 2 graduate programs, a Master of Science in Organization Development and an MBA, and a variety of concentrations in graduate certificates, including one in cybersecurity management. So if you're looking to learn more about this and gain those kinds of skills to get into the cybersecurity industry, let us know. And again, thank you all for taking the time to join us this afternoon, and we look forward to seeing you soon.